My daughter-in-law banned me. One dinner, one tragedy, and tonight mine began with a laminated face at the gate. I'm Marion Hale, 67, and the photo at the country club entrance was my driver's license blown up, sealed in plastic, and stamped with "Do not admit." The guard wouldn't meet my eyes. He read from a list like a metronome with a conscience. Somewhere inside, champagne popped. Somewhere inside, my son smiled for pictures. But out here, I was the unwelcome story at my own family's celebration. I raised 3 children on double shifts and coffee that tasted like pennies. The youngest, Evan, used to braid ribbon onto clumsy packages and promise, "When I grow up, I'll marry you." He did grow up. He married Sloan Archer instead. That's how it should be. But my daughter-in-law banned me is a sentence no mother expects to say out loud, least of all on her son's wedding day. Context matters. I hadn't been cut out all at once. It happened like a dimmer switch. Christmas worked better with her family. Easter made sense at her father's place. Mother's Day became after the seating chart. Each excuse wore a soft cardigan voice. And each time Evan asked, "You understand, right?" I understood the pattern, not the reason. Tonight I would learn both. Because before this night ends, one sentence from my son will change everything I thought I knew. I photographed the sign because humiliation deserves a witness, not the internet, just the truth kept in my pocket. The guard apologized again, cheeks pink, fingers tight on the clipboard. I spared him and walked away. Asphalt radiated heat through my heels. A maple shivered in the breeze, as if trying to shake me a message. In my car, the leather was cool and the silence louder than the band tuning up inside. My phone lit, 3 bouncing dots, then a text. "Mom, there's been a mix-up. Can you come back in 5? A mix-up is forgetting napkins, not laminating someone's face. I swallowed the taste of metal and wrote, "I won't make a scene. Be happy." I powered the phone off. The quiet pressed in. When grief moved into our house 5 years ago, it brought boxes and stayed. My husband, Daniel, died in March when the magnolias were opening. Evan helped with yard work, called every Sunday, and asked if I was taking my vitamins. Then Sloan arrived with hair the color of good champagne and a talent for making people disappear without raising her voice. Holidays shifted zip codes. My name began to fall off lists like a leaf that had simply reached its time. The engagement announcement didn't come from Evan's mouth, but from his feed. She said yes, over 2 perfect hands. I called. "September 14th, he said, while Sloan's coaching hummed in the background. "It'll be small, just close family." The invitation followed, addressed and guessed, as if I were an afterthought in my own child's story. Hope excused it. Hope, I've learned, is a talented liar. I ironed my navy dress, polished the pearls Daniel bought for our 20th, and arrived early enough to help if anyone wanted help. No one did. What they wanted was my absence. So much so that they ordered it in glossy plastic. Cruelty takes planning. Someone chose the photo. Someone drove to the print shop. Someone approved the red letters. That kind of effort isn't a mistake. It's a message. And messages can be answered. I stared through the windshield at the level lawns and the gleaming doors. I traced the shape of a sentence I wasn't ready to say, because when the time came, Evan's one sentence would either cut the rope or pull me back to shore. The sting was the sign. The hurt was the silence that followed. The knowledge that my son could be inside a few hundred feet away and still not cross the threshold to find me. I remembered the boy who slipped dandelions into my pockets like contraband sunshine. I wondered what he would think of this rehearsed exclusion, this polite erasure with fonts and lamination. I thought about going home, about boiling pasta, and pretending gowns and vows were none of my business. Instead, I unlocked the phone again. On the screen waited a thread of messages. Some from cousins, a few from neighbors who had heard something through the grapevine. I didn't answer any, not yet. I scrolled to a name I hadn't used in years. Arthur Penn, Daniel's older brother, corporate attorney, family law on the side. He had a way of asking questions that shook truth from tree limbs. My thumb hovered. I didn't press call, not yet. There's a moment before every bridge burns, when you can still walk away. I sat with that moment and let it breathe. Asking for help isn't surrender, Daniel told me once when a pipe burst at midnight. It's strategy. Strategy is a cold word for someone whose cheeks are hot, but strategy keeps people alive. If one sentence from Evan was coming, and I could feel it arriving like thunder before rain, I needed to be ready to hear it clearly, not through sirens of shame, not through the static of pride. A tap on my glass startled me. The guard, hat in hand, young enough to be my grandson. "Ma'am," he said, "I'm truly sorry. If it were up to me." He stopped. We both knew it wasn't. I hope you have a good evening. That was the cruelest line of all, because it was sincere and useless. I thanked him and watched him walk back to his post. I have believed all my life that family, even bent, can be straightened with time and care. Tonight challenged that belief with glossy plastic and red ink. There is a lesson worth staying for. By the end, it becomes clear how concern can turn to control, how love can be the mask ambition wears, and how one well-chosen sentence can reset a table stacked against you. I put the car in drive, let the tires roll, and then stopped. In the rearview mirror, the sign tilted in the wind, a flimsy door pretending to be a wall. Somewhere in my purse, my phone buzzed again, silent mode, the way I set it when I don't trust myself. Whether I would turn back towards the gate, or towards something else entirely hinged on what came next. I reached for the purse, not to make a scene, but to draw a line, because if cruelty is a message, boundaries are a reply. And if my daughter-in-law banned me is the first sentence of this night, the next one, my sons, will decide whether this story becomes an elegy or a reckoning. Christmas didn't vanish with a slammed door. It dimmed like a lamp someone kept turning down by degrees. The first year with Sloan, Evan said her grandmother couldn't travel, so they'd spend Christmas Eve at the Archers and drive to me on Christmas morning. We'll do stockings together, he promised, voice bright with solutions. Morning slid to afternoon, then to, we're still here, Mom. Traffic is awful. By dusk, he texted photos, matching pajamas, a golden doodle in a bow, Sloan's parents in coordinated red. Next weekend, he wrote. I typed, of course, and felt my keystrokes land like snow on water. The pattern repeated with charming reasons. Easter brunch made more sense near Sloan's church. 4th of July was tradition at her family's lake house. Mother's Day became a rain check signed in disappearing ink. There was no fight, no decree, just a steady reassigning of gravity. I told myself that's marriage. 2 planets learning each other's pull. But there's a difference between orbit and erasure. I heard it in Evan's new pauses, in how his sentences collected permissions before they ventured opinions. Sloan thinks, he'd begin, and whatever followed wore my son's voice. With someone else's certainty, little conveniences began to draw borders. Evan offered to help with my bills after his father died, just to keep things organized. He suggested consolidating accounts, so no one takes advantage. I believed him. He changed my phone plan to a family package with better rates, then moved my number under his login. Harmless, perhaps. But when I tried to add a contact one afternoon, I was told I didn't have administrator privileges on my own phone. I laughed at myself for being paranoid. Paranoia, however, is sometimes just pattern recognition with bad PR. There were kindnesses too. Dinners delivered, shelves installed. Oil changed without being asked. Sloan's niceness had no edges. It was professionally smooth, like a hotel bed you're grateful for and can't quite rest in. She noticed things. The unread books stacked by the sofa, the pill sorter on the counter. What does Dr. Lang prescribe those for? She asked casually, drying a wine glass that did not need drying. Sleep, I said, and only later realized she had prompted the answer instead of asking the question. The invitation to their engagement party was an email blast with an attached registry for your convenience. 2 items were already purchased from the groom's side, a high-end blender and a set of knives. I hadn't bought either. I wrote a note asking if there had been a mistake. Oh, Evan used your card to save time, Sloan replied within a minute, a speed that felt like preparedness more than attentiveness. I hope that's all right. I telephoned Evan, ready to be stern, and he rushed in with apologies so sincere they left no room for consequence. Of course I'll reimburse you, Mom. I wasn't thinking. He was thinking. He had been thinking for months, just not as my son. The mini twist arrived, folded into a program proof. Mrs. Archer runs a print shop. She sent a PDF to family for last looks. I opened it and stared. Under processional, Archer family. Under unseating, groom's friends. Archer relatives officiant, ka mi chure. A line near the bottom read, in honor of those watching from heaven, Daniel Hale. Tôi chạm vào tên anh ấy, biết ơn và đau đớn. Above it, a placeholder used at rehearsals, reserved for family, appeared beside the first row. Tôi đã viết một lá thăm lịch sử. Có thể chúng ta thêm mấy chú rể trên một trong những chiếc ghế, hay là nó đã được ngụ ý? The reply came from Sloan. We're keeping it simple for flow. Flow. The flow carried me downstream, around the bend, and out of sight. I kept telling myself not to turn everything into a verdict. People marry, Families blend, holidays shuffle. But then my neighbor Ruth arrived with a casserole and a face arranged for careful news. I ran into Sloane's aunt at the market, she said, setting the dish on my counter as if bracing it for an aftershock. She asked if you were feeling better. Better than what? I asked. And Ruth's eyes did that flit kind people do when they're about to hand you a sentence without knowing where to put it. She said you'd been having memory issues. That Evan was getting you help. I tasted aluminum. Who told her that? She said Sloane did. I'm sure it was a misunderstanding. Ruth meant well. Misunderstanding is a sweater we loan to cruelty, so it doesn't look indecent in public. I called Evan. He answered on the second ring. Voice cheerful, too fast. Mom, I was just about to call you. I told him what Ruth had said. He went quiet, then said, people talk. Don't take it to heart. People talk because they're told what to say? I replied. Are you telling them I'm unwell? He laughed, a sound I didn't recognize on him. Mom, come on. You know how gossip is. I knew how truth is when it's been introduced to ambition. I found a list in my kitchen drawer later that week. One I hadn't written but absolutely recognized in my own handwriting. It was a meal plan, a medication schedule, a set of reminders and bullet points, ending with, call Evan if confused. I stared, baffled, until I noticed the font of the bullets. I don't use bullets. Sloane had printed a template and coaxed me to copy from it so it feels familiar. Habits can be taught. Helplessness can be rehearsed. The night before the wedding, Evan stopped by with a tuxedo bag and a hug that lingered a beat too long. Apologies melting into my shoulder. Tomorrow is going to be complicated, he said, and something in his chest sagged against mine, the way a boy's fear used to. But I promise you, we're family. He wanted me to hold that sentence like a pacifier. I held it like evidence. When I arrived at the country club and saw my face laminated in warning, I understood the shape of the campaign Sloane had been running. Isolate, narrate, replace. Isolate me from rituals and rooms. Narrate me to the town as fragile and forgetful. Replace mother with problem to be managed. It wasn't loud. It was logistical. The kind of malice that blends in with planning. Strategy, Daniel once said, is choosing your next move before they know you've noticed the board. My next move didn't require grace. It required clarity. I needed a witness with teeth. Someone who knows how paper trails are braided and where seams show when you pull. I needed Arthur Penn. Before I dialed, I tested my own memory by inventorying 10 details from the hallway outside the ladies' lounge, a smear of lipstick on the third mirror, a chip in the marble near the second stall, a wedding bouquet of peonies and eucalyptus sitting briefly on the counter, a bridesmaid with damp mascara telling another it wasn't an accident, the citrus cleaner, the faint toast being rehearsed down the hall, the name Archer painted on a welcome sign in navy calligraphy, 2 champagne flutes fingerprinted near the stems, the exact shape of my humiliation on plastic. If I was losing my mind, it was in perfect detail. My phone buzzed, a text from Evan, Mom, please come back. There was a mistake at the gate. A mistake wears ink and lamination now. I typed, deleted, typed again. I almost wrote the sentence that would let him off the hook. It's fine, because mothers do that until the hook finds them. Instead, I sent, be kind to the guard. Then I scrolled to Arthur and pressed call. Looped curiosity pulled tight in my throat as the line rang. If Arthur picked up, I would turn humiliation into documentation. If he didn't, I would drive away, boil pasta, and pretend resilience is silence. The choice felt smaller than it was, and larger than I could carry alone. When he answered, Marion, in that surprised way only the past knows how to say your name, I exhaled a decade. Arthur, I said, I need you to help me see what I'm not supposed to see. There was a pause, and then the steadying sound of a pen uncapping. Tell me everything, and here is the hinge. Before this chapter ends, my son will speak a sentence that either confirms a conspiracy or cracks it open from the inside. Which of those futures would you be brave enough to hear if it was your child? Arthur answered on the third ring, his voice steady, a familiar anchor in a churning bay. Marion, he said, and the way he used my name made the room stop spinning. I told him about the sign, about the laminated picture, about the guard who apologized to me like a junior usher at a funeral he didn't plan. I kept my sentences short so my breath could keep up. He listened without interrupting until I reached the part where my phone buzzed with Evan's text. A mix-up. 5 minutes. Please come back. Cruelty that neat is never a mix-up, Arthur said. It's a memo. Papers rustled, and I pictured him clearing a space on his desk, lining up pens like chess pieces. We'll treat this as pattern, not incident. first. Send me a photo of the sign. Not edited, not cropped. Corners matter. I took the picture from my camera roll and forwarded it. He asked for the envelope from the invitation, the engagement email with the registry link, the PDF of the program with its immaculate flow, and the phone bill, where my number wandered under Evan's login. I sent each while he stayed on the line, naming the documents as if he were stitching them into a single fabric. "You're going to want to storm back in there," he said. "Don't. We need your anger to do paperwork. Practical mercy, the kind that keeps people from stepping on glass to prove a point." "I'm not imagining this," I said. Hearing how small that sounded made me angry all over again. "No," he said. "You're noticing it. That's different. Give me 20 minutes. Don't call anyone. Don't reply to anything. Stay in the car, doors locked. I'll circle back." He hung up, and the silence filled with the sound of a distant band testing levels. Someone hit a champagne glass with a spoon, and the cheer floated out like a soap bubble. I looked at the maple outside the club and counted leaves to keep from counting hurts. The trick with grief is it wears old coats. Daniel's death, Evan's distance, the scent of Sloane's perfume in my kitchen. After she left helpful lists behind, I traced the ridge in my wedding band, still on my right hand like a promise I refused to downgrade to memory. One sentence from my son would change everything. I had to decide whether that change would have records attached. Arthur called back faster than I expected. "2 things, he said. "The sign, a third-party print job. The stock is outdoor laminate, the size standard for private venue postings. That means someone placed a custom order and approved a proof. The program file you sent. Its metadata shows it was edited at Archer Printworks yesterday at 2:13 p.m. "Archer," I repeated. Sloane's last name sat in my mouth like a stone. "Family business," he said. "There's also a point of sale charge on your card last week for kitchen and hearth. The blender and knives. That's not reimbursement. That's assumption. And the email registry followed by immediate purchases from your account indicates access, not accident." I exhaled. "A pattern, not an incident. Next," he said, voice lowering. I'm looping in a colleague. "Private investigations. We won't run a full background yet. That comes with legal thresholds. But we can collect public records, prior name matches, and professional licenses. If there's nothing, we waste a night. If there's something, we get there while they're still busy cutting cake." "Arthur," I said, "what if there's something and my son knows?" "Then we follow process," he said. "We document. We don't confront. We give him a place to choose later where his feet can land on law, not just love." It was the first time that night I felt a floor under me. I waited while he made his other call. I watched couples in formal wear navigate the path like planets with assigned orbits. A little girl in patent leather shoes turned to look at me through the glass and waved. I waved back. Her mother tugged her toward the music. The band shifted into a standard, the kind you can dance to even if your heart is elsewhere. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. "We can fix tonight. Please wait by the fountain." A second message followed, a photo of the club's stone fountain framed by hedges. No one was in the frame, but I could feel the intent. Place, time, compliance. I didn't move. I forwarded both messages to Arthur. "Do not meet them," he texted back. "They want to pull you into a conversation they can later summarize on their terms." He called again. "If they ask to clear the air, they're building a record where you appear unstable or hostile. We won't give them that. If they want to talk, they can talk on paper, or they can talk to me." "Since when do I need a lawyer to speak to my son?" I asked. And the bitterness startled me, not because it was there, but because it didn't feel out of place anymore. "Since the moment someone wrote your name in red above "Do Not Admit," he said. "I'm sending you a checklist. It's not punishment, it's protection." The list arrived. Lock credit, pull bank statements, change email passwords, call the phone carrier from my own device, and reassert ownership of my number, request medical records from Dr. Lang in person, not through any proxy. "You aren't firing flares," he said. "You're closing windows." Halfway down the checklist, a small twist revealed itself like a snag in thread. The program PDF's metadata included a document history with initials. One of the editors wasn't an Archer at all, but S.A., Sloane Archer, and the other was E.A., Evan Archer. My son had taken her name on the website. I stared at the letters as if they could explain him. We teach our children to sign their names. We never imagine the day they'll use that signature to write us out. Arthur came back on the line. "Public records show a deed transfer last month into a trust with Sloane as trustee," he said. "Not illegal, but paired with the admin control of your phone, It suggests consolidation. I'm not going to speculate further until I have more. Tonight you go home. You do the checklist. You don't eat or drink anything from them. If Evan asks you to come by, decline politely and say you're tired. If Sloan texts something soothing, screenshot it and say nothing. And if Evan calls, you answer, you let him speak. You don't argue. If he offers a sentence that changes everything, you write it down exactly. He paused. Marion, your son may still be your son. He may also be someone else's plan. Let him show you who's talking. A chime. Another text from Evan now, his name bright on my dark screen. Mom, I'm so sorry. Can we talk tomorrow? Sloan feels awful. Come to dinner? We'll make it right. A dinner to make it right. Soft language wrapped around a hard objective. I copied the text to Arthur and typed back. Tomorrow is full. Let's talk soon. I pressed send, then sat with the quiet anger of a woman who has been invited to her own correction. Expect a second invitation, Arthur said. Kindness that urgent has a clock on it. We will control the timing. Arthur, I asked, how did you know the laminate was outdoor grade? He laughed softly. Because I've had clients banned from places before. The laugh faded. And because when people want to humiliate you in the rain, they make sure the ink won't run. On the drive home, the country club receded in the mirror, like the closing credits of a film I hadn't agreed to star in. I kept to the right lane, counted streetlights, and let my breath learn the road. I thought of the list in my drawer, the one with my handwriting and her bullets. I thought of the line on the program where mother of the groom should be, and of the child's face at the window who waved at me as if I belonged. I decided, as the last green light gave me passage, that I would not be coached into disappearing. At a red light, I called my voicemail, a habit from the payphone era, and recorded the date, the time, and a brief summary of the night, the sign, the texts, the call with Arthur, the dinner invitation. My voice sounded like someone else's resolve. Maybe it was. Maybe resolve is the person you become when love behaves like weather and you choose a roof. I parked, turned off the engine, and sat in the dark while the house recognized me by the creak of its steps. I checked the back door twice, then thrice, not because I was afraid of shadows, but because certainty is a sedative I could still afford. My phone buzzed on the counter one last time. Unknown number again. No hard feelings about today. Let's start fresh. Fresh is a word I now hear in past tense. I didn't reply. I made tea I didn't drink. I opened Daniel's old metal file box and set a new folder inside, labeled with today's date. The first page was the photo of the sign. The second was my own list. No bullets, just verbs. At the bottom, I wrote a sentence to myself so I'd see it in the morning. You are not imagining this. You are preparing for it. And because one sentence from my son still waited like a coin on the lip of a well, I left the porch light on, not as invitation but as witness. When the call came, and it would, I wanted the house to hear it too. What gets protected first when the people you love begin to narrate you out of your life? Your heart, your name, or your proof? Arthur looped in a private investigator named Kit Delgado, the kind of calm that makes other people stop pretending. They worked in tandem, Arthur on the paper trail, Kit on the footprints people leave when they think they're floating. Within an hour, the bones of a pattern rose from ordinary records, like a watermark in sunlight. Sloan Archer didn't begin as Sloan Archer. The first breadcrumb was a county filing from 7 years ago under Sloan Avery, a name tied to a short marriage that ended with a sealed settlement and a change of address 2 towns over. 3 years before that, a marriage license appeared for Brooke Harrington. Same birth month, same eye color, same height, same neat rounded signature, and a divorce finalized in under 11 months with a transfer of household assets and a convertible title. Go back farther, and you find Lydia Voss, this time with a certificate of marriage to a man 20 years older who owned 2 rental properties and an annuity, dissolved after irreconcilable differences, and followed by a quiet payout that never made the paper but shows up in a lien release. Cycles, Kit said on speaker, factual as a weather report, short marriages, financial betterment, immediate repositioning, no criminal record on its face, but the timing speaks. He sent a slim dossier. Public, dry, undeniable. Dates aligned a little too neatly with men who had recently buried a parent. Men whose grief would have made a hurricane look like a gentle wind. Notice something else, Arthur added. This certificate. He forwarded a scanned document. Certified grief recovery specialist from a weekend program. Next to it, a volunteer roster from a nonprofit that hosted Rebuild After Loss mixers. The roster listed a familiar name in elegant script. Sloan A., where Evan met her. I said, throat tight. If you're fishing, you stand where the fish come to drink. Midway through the call, the first twist arrived. Not loud, but sharp. I pulled a soft copy of your recent credit inquiries. Arthur said, you authorized that when you applied for the travel card last winter. He paused and papers whispered. 3 months ago, there was a pre-screen inquiry from Provident Mutual, the life insurance division. It's categorized as a senior preferred product, non-smoker, with a note for third-party financial representative, which means someone signaled interest on your behalf before a formal application. I felt cold in my wrists. I didn't request that. I know, he said, which is why it matters. Kit, efficient, layered context. A pattern with grief-adjacent women who marry men quickly often includes insurance scaffolding, he said. Not always illegal, but often predatory. He cleared his throat. There's more. One of the prior husbands, on the Harrington license, Michael Voss, was reported deceased in a boating incident on a lake in New Hampshire. The death certificate is flagged amended with a note. Medical examiner's office requested review. That's unusual. I pressed my palm to the table, steadying the house under my hand. Dead or not? Alive, Kit said after a beat. Relocated. No more on an open line, but the certificate's amendment means a story changed mid-telling. Another breadcrumb, not glamorous, just telling. A HIPAA authorization filed through a concierge clinic last fall, listing Evan Archer as my emergency contact, which he is, but with a second line granting S. Archer permission to discuss medication management. I pictured the pill sorter on my counter and felt my jaw set like a latch. They're writing a narrative, Arthur said, gentle and merciless. Not unwell, but in need of help. Once that sticks, access turns into authority. I wanted to call my son and say his name until it landed somewhere true. Instead, I asked for the kind of truth you can staple. Arthur obliged. Point of sale records show the "Do Not Admit" sign was ordered from Archer Printworks with a rush fee, he said. The invoice lists a reference. Gate list signage 11 and an approval email from Est Archer at a pause. The CC line is E. Archer. I closed my eyes. Signatures again. We teach our children to sign things. We do not imagine the day their initials arrive as exhibits. Kit's tone stayed level. There's also a small LLC, Archer Voss Consulting, opened last year, now dissolved, he said. No tax delinquencies, no lawsuits, but its registered purpose was family transition planning. The address was a mailbox rental. The state requires little to open, and even less to close something like that. But the initials are a choice. Voss, the deceased husband's last name. People reuse monograms when they believe no one is looking. I sat with the pile, not as a victim, but as a witness to my own life. Tôi nghĩ đến ngôn ngữ mềm mại của Sloan. Dòng chảy, làm cho nó đúng, bắt đầu lại, và nghe thấy lưỡi cung đằng sau nó. Control is most effective when it feels like care. It was time to stop being polite with myself. Arthur, I said, how far does this go before we stop making lists and start making calls outside your office? Anh không nháy mắt, tôi không thể nghe anh ấy nháy mắt. Chúng tôi gần nhau, anh ấy nói. Documentation first, then law. Nếu chúng ta đi quá sớm, nó trở thành một cuộc tranh cãi trong gia đình. If we wait too long, it becomes a crisis report, with you in the middle. Kids moving on a background packet, we can hand to the proper desk if needed. Proper desk meant people with badges and warrants. I exhaled and felt my breath return my name to me. We broke the evening into assignments. I would drive to my doctor in the morning and request my entire file in person. I would contact the carrier to restore administrator status to my phone line and request an audit of changes made in the past year. Arthur would draft a letter asserting that all health, financial, and legal conversations about me must include me, signed by me, dated by me, delivered by certified mail. Kit would map the names, Avery, Harrington, Voss, Archer, against counties and dates, looking for forgotten fragments. A complaint, a neighbor's statement, an insurance broker's notation that didn't feel right when he filed it. Then the second twist flicked on like a hallway light. Found a certificate from a grief program, Kit said. Cross-checked photos from their public page with Sloane's profile. She's in 3 shots, always next to the sign-in table. He sent the images. In one, her smile met the camera with practiced warmth. And right behind her, bent over a clipboard, was Evan. The timestamp was 3 months after Daniel's funeral. I stared at my son's posture, earnest, tired, reachable, and at the woman who had arranged herself so the tired would reach for her. A new text buzzed. Evan. Mom, we know today was hard. Sloan wants to make dinner tomorrow. Just us, please. The tenderness had a timer on it. I could hear it ticking. I forwarded the message. Arthur called at once. Decline for now, he said. If they're accelerating, they'll try to convert niceness into access. We'll control the venue. If there's a dinner, we decide where and under what conditions. Conditions? I asked. Like you're a cop? Like you're a person, he said. I walked through my house, touching the tops of chairs the way you touch heads in blessing. The maple outside threw leaves at the window, as if reminding me that things fall, and falling is sometimes the only honest verb available. On my desk, I opened a new notebook and wrote what I know at the top of page 1. I listed the who and the when and the how in columns that made me feel less like a myth and more like a case. Then I wrote a sentence that wasn't for court, but for Marrow. My love for my son does not require my surrender to his story about me. Arthur's final call of the night came with a steadiness I wanted to pour into my tea. Tomorrow, he said, we move from noticing to proving. If there's a larger pattern, aliases, accelerated marriages, insurance, then the people who track patterns will want to look. But Marion, listen to me. If Evan calls before then and says something that sounds like confession, do not fill the silence. Let him finish. The exact words matter. The exact words always matter. One sentence can cut a rope or untie a knot, and the difference is which end you hold when it's spoken. Before bed, I set the tea aside untouched and checked the back door again. I slid Daniel's photo a fraction straighter on the mantle and whispered what I should have said aloud when the grief counselor suggested I let go. Letting go is not the same as letting someone else write you. Then I put my phone on the charger across the room, so when it rang, I would have to stand, and standing would remind me that even now, action is a choice. At 11:50 p.m., the screen lit the ceiling faint blue. Unknown number. No hard feelings. Tomorrow fixes everything. Tomorrow does not fix anything on its own. People do. Plans do. Proof does. I silenced the phone and slept like a guard dog, lightly facing the door. Morning would bring a decision, and if we were right, an invitation that looked like peace and behaved like step 1. If it came, would I meet it with appetite or with evidence? The morning brought apologies that read like silk. Last night was unforgivable, Evan wrote. Sloane cried herself to sleep. Can we make dinner tomorrow and talk? The words were tender, timed, and threaded with a hurry I could hear between vowels. My daughter-in-law banned me, and now the cure was a meal at her table. Arthur called before I answered. They'll propose their house, he said. Control favors the host. Offer a neutral spot. I typed, let's meet at Delaney's on Maple. Early evening works. Sloane replied within minutes from her number. The friendliness precise. We adore Delaney's, but our kitchen is already mid-prep. I've planned something special just for you. Special is a word that often arrives with instructions. I sent the exchange to Arthur. Decline once, he said. Twice if needed. If they insist, we note the insistence. I wrote, I'm keeping things simple this week. Restaurant is best for me. Sloane's dots danced. Then, of course, how about we swing by and pick you up? We can drive together and catch up. A kindness shaped like a transfer of custody. I'll meet you there, I answered. 6 p.m., Evan called, his voice the shape of every summer we ever had. Mom, please don't be mad, he said. Yesterday spiraled. Sloane never meant for that sign. She's talking to the venue. I pictured the invoice with her email on the approval line and let the lie float. Unbothered by oxygen. We'll fix this tonight, he said, and his certainty felt borrowed. We'll start fresh. Fresh was last night's word. Then the mini twist landed. Small but bright. A text from a new number. Hi, Marion. Dr. Halpern here. Evan mentioned a light sleep issue. If you're willing, I can join you all briefly before dinner to make a quick plan. Totally informal. The invitation was now a consultation, and the meal a corridor. I forwarded the message. Arthur didn't swear often. This time his breath did it for him. No doctor visits in public dining rooms, he said. No assessments at a table. You respond with something bland and declining. I typed, thank you, doctor. I have a long relationship with Dr. Lang, and will follow up with her. He replied with a thumbs-up bubble and a smiley face that looked like tape over a mouth. Evan pinged a second later. He's great, Mom. Very modern, helps with sleep and anxiety. Will only keep you 5 minutes. Keep me, he said, as if time were a leash. Kit chimed in by noon. Pulled a few reviews, he said. Halpern runs a concierge practice that coordinates transitions. He's legitimate. but his office partners with placement services for senior communities. He paused. Half of the reviewers are adult children. My pill sorter sat on the counter and glittered like a dare. At 2, a courier rang. A cream envelope, my name in friendly ink. Inside lay a single page. Independent living options. A gentle guide. I flipped it over. The return address was an Archer mailbox. The guide's tone was soothing, and every phrase carried the same hidden operator. Simplify decision-making. Protect your assets. Let your family help. A sticky note in Sloane's perfect hand. No pressure, just resources. We can chat over dinner. XO. Arthur's advice arrived with the gravity of a plumb line. You will not go as a guest, he said. If you go at all, you go as a historian. You take notes after, not during. You drink nothing you didn't open yourself. You eat nothing you didn't serve. You leave when the conversation turns to your memory, your medications, or your housing. I wrote it down exactly. Evan sent a photo from their kitchen. Salmon, fillets, asparagus, lemons laid like intentions. Your favorite, he texted. We can skip the restaurant and be comfortable here. He had never once cooked salmon for me. He had never asked if I liked it. I typed, Delaney's at 6. He typed, please. And the pleading tugged at the part of me that remembers dandelions in my pockets. At 4, the venue manager from the club called, prompted by Arthur's certified letter. Her voice was defensive and thin. We regret any misunderstanding, she said. The signage was a third-party error. I asked her to repeat the phrase. She did, and it sounded like a training wheel for liability. Who submitted the design? I asked. I'm not at liberty to, she began, and stopped. We both let that sentence be what it was. The hour before dinner is the longest hour in a house that knows your footsteps. I moved a stack of mail from the table to the desk, then back again. I set water to boil and turned the stove off. I took my pearls from their dish and set them down, then picked them up, then set them down again. I stood at the window and watched the maple negotiate with the wind. Somewhere between leaf and branch, I decided I would meet my son on neutral ground, or I would not meet him tonight at all. At 5:10 p.m., Evan called. We're at Delaney's, he said, the lie trying too hard. Table by the window. I'll see you at 6, I said. I'll be a few minutes late. I put the phone in my purse and waited until 5:58 to leave my driveway. The distance to Delaney's is 11 minutes if you accelerate, 13 if you breathe. I breathed. They were not at Delaney's. Of course they weren't. The hostess shook her head with practiced regret. No reservation under Archer, she said, or Hale. I thanked her and stepped outside. Evan's message arrived on cue. Change of plans. We're at home. It's quieter. Please come. We can talk better here. The pivot was the plan. I could feel Arthur's rules in my pocket like stones. Neutral ground, not theirs. My thumb hovered over call. I didn't press. I wrote, I am not comfortable with a home visit tonight. Let's reschedule. Evan called immediately. Why are you making this hard? He asked, and I heard a tremor that belonged to the boy who once wanted everything to be easy. Because it is hard, I said. Because what happened last night was planned, not a mistake. Because someone made a sign to keep me out. There was a long silence. Mom, he said finally, softer. Please, just come. We can fix it. On the sidewalk, the mini-twist surfaced with a hand on my arm. Ruth, my neighbor, breathless. I saw your car, she said. I don't want to interfere, but Sloane asked me for your spare key last month. Said she was planning a surprise pantry organization and didn't want to bother you. I said no. It felt wrong. I should have told you sooner. The key on my ring felt heavier. I thanked Ruth, and we stood together without speaking until the quiet told us we could go back to our separate evenings. Evan texted an address I already knew by heart. We'll wait, he wrote. No rush. Waiting is a tactic when it's wearing cologne. I typed, another night. He answered with 3 dots that never became words. On my way home, I drove by their street and didn't turn in. Through a gap in the hedge, I saw a table set for 3, candles unlit, wine breathing, a pitcher of water weighted with slices of lemon that made the glass look festive. I thought about how many traps in this world smell like citrus. Back in my kitchen, I opened a new bottle of water and placed it on the table where my hands could see it. I set out my notebook. I wrote the date, the times, the calls, the lies, the invitations, the pivot. I wrote Delaney's, no reservation, and underlined it twice. Then I wrote a line I did not want to write. If I go to their house, I will bring proof home. At 5:00 p.m., a final message from the unknown number. We can start without the doctor. The doctor who was not coming to a restaurant anyway? The doctor who was a corridor word. Start. Start what? My daughter-in-law banned me from my son's wedding and then invited me to dinner to fix the story. The remedy looked like salmon, like lemon, like clean counters. It smelled like control. I stood in the doorway between my kitchen and the hall and felt the floor choose me. Tomorrow, Arthur would hand me a next step that had switches and batteries. Tonight, I would choose not to be softened by apologies that asked me to walk blind. I agreed to 10 minutes, nothing more. Not dinner, not a drive together, not a favor dressed as forgiveness, just a brief talk before any future plans. Boundaries, Arthur said, turn fog into walls. I brought my own bottle of water and twisted the cap open in their driveway so the crack would be loud enough to hear. Sloane opened the door in a linen dress, the color of cream. You look radiant, she said, and the word clung to me like static. The table was set for 3 with white plates and lemon slices shining in a glass pitcher. Salmon cooled on a platter. It smelled like intention. Just 10 minutes, I said. At most. Of course. Her smile widened a millimeter. A spritz? Elderflower and gin. So refreshing. Water's fine. I lifted my bottle. The gesture felt like a passport check. Evan appeared with napkins folded into boats. Mom, he said, voice warm, hopeful, practiced. Thank you for giving us tonight. We want to fix this. Fix. As if humiliation could be patched with citrus and apologies. We sat but did not eat. Sloane talked about menus, flowers, the venue's unacceptable mistake. The word mistake took the room's temperature and set it to 68 degrees. They're refunding the security vendor, she said, as if money paid for dignity lost. I received your guide, I said. Independent living options. Her lashes dipped. No pressure, she said. Just resources. Who asked you to send it? We're all adjusting, she said. We want you supported. Supported is the kind of kindness that arrives with rails. Evan reached across the table. We know you've been having some sleep trouble. Dr. Halpern is wonderful. He can help. I have a doctor, I said. I've had her for 15 years. Of course, Sloane said. But Dr. Halpern has a modern approach. Medication management. Gentle transitions. The words sounded like gauze. Soft until you realized you were wrapped in it. A small tray appeared at the edge of the table. Honey, tea, a porcelain cup already steaming. Chamomile, Sloane said. Settles the nerves. I checked my watch. We had used 6 of my 10 minutes. I'll pass. Just a sip, she said, bright and patient. It's calming. I'm calm. I set my unopened mouth on the word and let it sit there. The mini twist arrived as quietly as a whisper. Evan slid a single sheet across the table, stapled neatly at the corner. We made a little emergency plan, he said, just in case. Totally optional. At the top, thông báo phát hành and giảm sức khỏe. My name and birth date were pre-typed. Hai dòng chữ ký cho ở dưới, giống như hai bàn tay mở rộng, không chứng nhận. Tôi hỏi, we can do that later, Sloane said, as if it were a party errand. This is just so doctors will talk to us when you're tired. Hita met, tôi lặp lại. And to streamline decisions, Evan added, so no one takes advantage. Someone already tried, I said. Ho dan met tôi. Silence stitched itself between us. Sloane reached for the kettle, its lid rattling faintly as if it knew a stage cue. She poured more hot water into the porcelain cup. Mom, Evan said gently, I hate that last night happened. I told them to take the sign down. I promise you, it wasn't meant. It was ordered. I said, approved, paid for. That isn't a gust of wind. It's a plan. He swallowed. His throat moved like someone trying to pass a stone. Sloane leaned in. Let's start over. We're family. Family cares. Family notices when the mail piles up, when the garden gets ahead of you, when sleep won't come. My garden is alive, I said. So am I. She laughed softly. Of course. But planning is love. On the counter behind her, a small amber bottle sat without its label, the adhesive halo still clinging to the glass. Next to it, a medicine dropper shone the way clean things do when they've been used. I registered it and kept my gaze steady on Sloane's face. I have learned that the difference between panic and clarity is where your eyes decide to rest. We'll keep this simple, Evan said, nudging the proxy closer. Sign tonight and we'll all breathe easier. Why the hurry? I asked. Sloane's smile held. Because waiting breeds confusion, and confusion hurts everyone. Who's confused? I said. She blinked, calibrating. Stress does things to memory at any age. My age is not an illness. Of course not. We're just noticing. I finished for her. 9 minutes. 2 left. Mom, Evan said, voice softening to the boy who once left dandelions on my windowsill. Say the word, and we can make this easy. He slid the pen toward me, the way you slide dessert to a dear guest. Say, you trust us. Trust is not a word you request. It's a word you earn. Here's what I'll say, I answered. No more paperwork I didn't ask for. No more guides and cream envelopes. No more doctors who meet me at tables. No more stories told about me to anyone who introduces themselves as family friend in a grocery line. Sloane sat back, her smile emptied and refilled with something shinier. We're trying to help, she said. You sound defensive. Or awake, I said. The kettle hissed. The air smelled like lemon and something else I didn't have a word for yet. We can try another night, Evan said quickly. We got ahead of ourselves. He gathered the proxy, but not before I saw the second page peeking out beneath it. Durable power of attorney, draft. My name in the header. The date left blank. The signature line, as patient as a trap. I stood. My 10 minutes are up. Evan rose too. I'll walk you out. At the door, he touched my elbow, a pressure both careful and seeking. Mom, he whispered, this is all for you, I swear. I lowered my voice to match his. Then the next plan will include me. Outside, the air had that evening clarity that makes edges seem honest. I opened the car door and heard the bottle cap squeak against my palm. Evan stopped on the porch, halfway between the house he chose and the driveway he grew up learning to shovel. He looked smaller than his jacket. Behind the glass, Sloane lifted the teacup, checked the time on the oven clock, and set the cup down untouched. In the reflection, I could see my own face again, not laminated, just alive. I drove a single block before pulling over to write everything down. The proxy, the draft power of attorney, the amber bottle, the dropper, the way Sloane's voice wrapped help in cotton and handed it to me like a gift. I called Arthur and read the notes aloud, my voice steadier than my hands. He didn't wait for the ending. Enough, he said. We escalate. Tomorrow we change the terms. Tomorrow you will not walk into any room alone. Police? I asked. Process, he said. And a device. You'll wear a pendant that remembers. Toinyan Valkenke, Bang Lung Chenking Chenza. It held a bird's nest I hadn't noticed before. Twigs, string, a scrap of ribbon from some other celebration. Chumbichom Zomyu Kinyan, Kina Danglam Viek. Back home, I found the Independent Living Guide on my counter and slid it into a folder now too thick for a clip. At the top of a new page I wrote, tonight's plan was care. Under it, care without consent is control. I underlined control twice and drew a box around it so my future self wouldn't skim past the truth. My phone buzzed on the table. Evan, thank you for coming by. We love you. Tomorrow? The word love looked decent there, printed without smudges. But love that hurries you toward a signature you didn't choose is something else entirely. I typed, tomorrow, I'll let you know when and where. Then I laid the phone face down so I could hear my own decision without it arguing. If tomorrow brings a pearl that hears and a plan that bites back, what part of me will tremble more? The mother or the witness? Since my daughter-in-law banned me from my own son's wedding, I stopped trusting apologies and started trusting records. Arthur arrived at noon with a small case and the kind of steadiness that makes a room quit spinning. Inside the case lay a pearl pendant on a fine chain, a pen that was more than a pen, and a thin leather clutch. This remembers, he said, setting the pendant in my palm. Press once to wake it, once to sleep. The clutch is voice activated. You'll carry both. He didn't lecture me about courage. He handed me tools. Kit called in on speaker. Keep your movements ordinary, he said. You're not a detective. You're a narrator with proof. Arthur had already handled the legalities I didn't want to Google at 3 a.m. You're allowed to record your own conversations, he said gently. We're done giving the benefit of the doubt to people who laminate humiliation. We rehearsed phrases that invited people to say who they were, not traps, doors. What did you mean by medication management? Which form needs my signature tonight? Why the rush? I practiced in the hallway mirror, learned where my voice hardens and where it breaks, and chose the hardening. At 2, I called Evan. I can stop by the house, I said, calm as a recipe. 10 minutes on the porch, no dinner, no fuss. He sounded relieved and eager at the same time. Perfect. We only want to start fresh. Fresh had become their favorite word for control. I wore the pendant and a cardigan you forget to notice. The porch smelled like lemon oil and something vaguely sweet. Sloane opened the door far enough to be hospitable. and not far enough to seed ground. Radiant again, she said, and the pendant warmed against my skin as if it understood praise when it's being used as packaging. We'll keep it short, I said, staying outside. No drinks, no tea, no forms. The last word barely left my mouth before the mini twist surfaced. Evan's hand appeared with a trifold and a hopeful pen. This one's just the basic consent, he murmured. So Dr. Halpern can coordinate with Dr. Lang. He had stapled a sticky note to it like a smile. I didn't touch the paper. Tell me why tonight, I asked. If it's only consent. He blinked, then said a sentence he thought was harmless. We already started the policy, Mom. They just need a quick phone interview. The pearl rested colder. The recording rested warmer. Policy? I said. He swallowed. A safety net. Standard. Sloane's mouth kept smiling while her eyes measured distance. Language is tricky, she said. Policy sounds so formal. Think of it as a family plan. Family plans do not begin at my neck and end at my signature. I let the porch be a confessional. Explain medication management again, I asked quietly. Sloane's voice softened to physician adjacent. Dr. Halpern helps older adults sleep, ease anxiety, and transition to environments with more support. Environments with more support, I repeated, because repeating is a mirror that makes people look at themselves. She nodded. Independent living. Only if you want it. Behind her, through the entry mirror, I could see the kitchen counter, and on it an amber bottle with a gummy halo where a label used to be. Evan booked in bentoy. Hai bantay mo ra. We love you, he said. De la chúng tôi yêu bạn. Love is not a pen. Love is not a timer. Love is not a chair that only fits if you sign first. Tôi đã giữ lại chuyến thăm trong 7 phút và rồi đi với chiếc vòng cổ đầy những câu nói và đôi tay trống rỗng như tôi đã dự định. At home, I set the clutch on the table and watched the waveform of our porch talk draw its careful mountain range across Arthur's laptop. We listened without interrupting ourselves. We heard what we already knew and what we hadn't let ourselves name. Arthur paused and rewound at Evans. We already started the policy. He hit play again, eyes half closed the way a surgeon might lean toward a monitor. There, he said. That's not care. That's scaffolding. Kit texted while we were still listening. A screenshot of a note from Providence call center log. Obtain the legal way a seasoned investigator knows. Pre-application info verified by spouse. Beneficiary. Pending. My name sat on the line above it as if waiting its turn. We didn't celebrate the find. We placed it. Arthur xây dựng một thư mục nhanh như một số người. By một ban. Porch recording. Registry charges. The program metadata. The Archer Printworks invoice. The concierge, doctor's text, the independent living guide in cream, Evan's policy sentence on a loop, transcribed verbatim. Proof does not care about tone. It only cares about time and text. Tomorrow, Arthur said, you meet Dr. Lang in person. You request your entire chart. You document that you are oriented, capable, and declining any change of proxy. Then we change your phone plan back to your control and lock the credit reports. He looked up, measuring me for something other than fear. After that, we let the people who track patterns hear what you've heard. I slept in pieces and woke with a list for bones. At 9 a.m., I sat in Dr. Lang's office, where nothing smells like lemon oil, and told her everything from lamination to porch. She listened the way doctors are supposed to. Present, undistracted, allied with the facts. You're not confused, she said. You're being managed. She printed a brief note for my file and for me. Patient is fully oriented to person, place, and time. No cognitive impairment observed. It wasn't a billboard. It was a stake. At the carrier store, a woman named Tasha restored administrator control to my line with the speed of a person who enjoys restoring balance. Happens more than you'd think, she said, clicking. People get helped out of their own settings. She printed a changelog and highlighted entries I hadn't made. If anyone tries to move your number again, she said, you'll get a code. The code felt like a lock finally learning its own door. On the drive home, my phone rang from a blocked number. I let it go to voicemail, pulled into my driveway, and pressed play on speaker so my house could hear it with me. Mrs. Hale, a woman said, professional but human. This is Nora James with the U.S. Attorney's Office. A colleague forwarded materials bearing on an active inquiry. If you're willing, we'd like to speak today. She left a callback and a case number. I stared at the siding of my house, at the maples shading the porch, at the light that looked perfectly normal, and let the words line up in an order that meant, the board is flipping. Arthur called before I could call back. They're good, he said. They don't ring bells unless a parade is already halfway down the street. We arranged a time and a place with walls that understand confidentiality. I wore the pendant, not because I needed it for them, but because I had decided who I am now, a woman who remembers. At lunch, the doorbell rang. Sloane on my steps again, hair smooth, smile ironed. She held a paper bag folded neatly at the top. "Lemon chicken soup," she said. "For later." I kept the chain on the door. "Leave it on the chair," I said. "Thank you." She didn't move. "We should talk," she said. "Evan's heart is broken." "He can call me," I said. "Not tonight." Her eyes flashed and smoothed. "You're making this adversarial," she said, as if vocabulary could shame me into compliance. "I'm making it documented," I said. The chain stayed where it was supposed to be. She set the bag down, stepped back, and tried one more angle. "It's lonely, Marian," she said, sympathy curling around the word like ribbon. "Let us help." "Help isn't a form that waits with a pen," I said, and closed the door before my voice tried to be kinder than the situation warranted. When I met Nora James that afternoon, she brought no drama, only questions. She had a file with tabs that looked like they had been expecting me. "We've seen the names you and Mr. Penn surfaced," she said. "We've also seen others. We're going to ask you to do something difficult and useful." I didn't need her to finish. "Record," I said. Nora nodded. "If there's going to be an ask about medication, proxies, or housing, we want it in their voices." She slid a small device across the table anyway, a backup to my pendant, because professionals believe in redundancy. On my way home, I parked at the curb a block early and walked the last stretch, counting steps to quiet my pulse. The porch chair held the soup bag, like a prop waiting for its scene. I carried it to the sink, opened it, and poured the contents into the drain. Lemon rose and vanished. I rinsed the pot twice because rinsing is a kind of prayer. Night brought a text from Evan. Just 4 words. "Can we start over?" The pendant lay on my bedside table, a small moon that had learned to hear. I typed back, "Tomorrow, noon, my house, just you." It was not a peace offering. It was a stage direction. If one sentence from my son was going to change everything, I wanted it spoken where the walls knew my name. The board has flipped. The pieces are moving, and the clock just started ticking on someone else's plan. When your proof begins to speak, which truth would you ask it to tell first? Since my daughter-in-law banned me from my own son's wedding, I have learned to move like paper. Quiet, dated, signed. The U.S. Attorney's Office didn't bring sirens. It brought a conference room that smelled like carpet cleaner and certainty. Nora James set a thin recorder in the middle of the table. Not to capture me, but to remind us what truth sounds like when nobody is shouting. "You're a victim witness," she said. "You're allowed to record your own conversations. We need the offers, the pressure, the timing, in their words." Arthur slid my pearl pendant closer. Kit took a chair by the door, casual as a coat rack. We built a plan simple enough to remember when nerves misbehaved. Evan would come to my house at noon. Without Sloane, there would be no food, no tea, no forms. I would keep my hands still and my questions ordinary. "Don't argue," Nora said. "Invite." What did you mean by policy? Why now? Who suggested Dr. Halpern? Let them choose their verbs. Verbs can convict. We tested the pendant again. One press woke it. A soft green blink admitted the room. The clutch beside it would hear from across the table. A second device, Nora's, could live under a coaster like a quiet coin. "If he brings documents," Arthur said, "you do not touch them. Ask him to read them aloud." I wrote it down, even though the sentence lodged itself without ink. Before I left, Nora shared the first hard gift of the day. "We've been tracking a woman who fits your daughter-in-law's pattern," she said, measured and merciful. "Different names, grief-adjacent events, quick marriages, insurance activity, then transitions that look like care until they don't." She paused. "One prior husband, Michael Voss, was reported deceased in a boating accident. He's alive and cooperating from a safe location." The air tightened and then let go. A second name followed, softer but no less sharp. Another, David Harrington, disappeared from public life after a fatal crash. He is also alive. The room recalibrated itself around that word, alive. It meant the pattern wasn't rumor. It meant somebody else's almost widowhood had a pulse. The mini twist arrived through a speakerphone. With Nora present, I called Provident Mutual, using the general number on my mailer, not the link Sloane had texted. "We're verifying a pre-screen inquiry," I said, giving my full name and last 4 digits as the menu demanded. The representative was pleasant and precise. Yes, Mrs. Hale. A senior preferred policy was initiated 3 months ago. Beneficiary designation is pending completion of a phone interview and paramed exam. I felt my heartbeat in my wrist. Who initiated it? Our noteless third-party representative with spousal contact for medical coordination. What's the appointment date? The line went quiet long enough to feel like a choice. Next Tuesday, 10 a.m., in home, she said at last. Scheduled by S. Archer. I thanked her and hung up. Nobody in the room moved for a full breath. We didn't need to explain to each other why an in-home appointment was not merely convenient. Back at my kitchen table, I set the pendant where the morning light could find it. I poured water I had opened myself. The house listened the way old houses do, siding settling, refrigerator ticking, a swallow testing the gutter. Arthur reviewed the script with me one last time. Do not mention prosecutors. Do not say recording. Ask about last night's forms. Ask who pays Dr. Halpern's concierge fee. Ask why they need authority before Tuesday. He stopped, then added what no outline can hold. If he begins to be your son again, don't rescue him from his own sentence. At 11:47, a black sedan idled 2 houses down. I recognized Kit's shoulder in the driver's seat. Across the street, a woman with a stroller paused longer than strollers pause. She wasn't a mother. She was a microphone with sunglasses. It felt absurd to be guarded on my own block until I looked at the file on my table and remembered the laminated sign at the gate. Absurdity and necessity have been roommates all week. Noon approached the way weather does. Inevitable. Larger than my calendar. Evan texted, parking. I stood, heard my knees click like old castanets, and sat again. The doorbell rang once. I let it ring twice. When I opened the door, he was alone, hands in his jacket. Face bare of the rehearsed smile I've seen too often. For a second, we were 2 people who used to know how to be in the same room without scripts. Hi, Mom, he said. His voice tried to be casual and landed in careful. Hi, sweetheart, I answered, and made room for both of us to be honest. We sat at the table we used to spread puzzles on. I set a coaster over Nora's device and touched the pendant's clasp. Evan noticed the necklace and smiled. Dad's pearls, he said. He'd like that. The mention of Daniel made the room tilt and then right itself. I didn't offer water. I offered time. You said we could start over, I said. Start with what? He exhaled through his nose. With the misunderstanding, he said. With the sign. It wasn't supposed to. I held up a hand, palm gentle. It was ordered, approved, and paid for, I said. We don't need to edit that. He looked down at his fingers as if they might spell something he could live with. Okay, he said quietly. You're right. He glanced at the counter, at the absence of tea. I wanted this to be easier. He reached into his jacket and set a manila folder on the table. I didn't touch it. Tell me what's inside, I said. Consent forms, he said. Coordination with Dr. Halpern, an information release so we don't get blocked when we call, and a draft of a durable power of attorney, just in case. He said the last 2 words like bubble wrap, meant to muffle breakage. Why now? I asked. Because Tuesday, he said before he could stop himself. Because the nurse is coming, and they need... He closed his mouth, then opened it again and let the sentence finish. They need proof we can help. He did not say who needed it. He did not need to. Why do you and Sloan need to help me manage my life insurance? I asked. Plain as bread. He flinched as if air had hands. It's standard, he said. A safety net. He was repeating a script written in someone else's font. Who told you to say that? I asked. He looked at me, and for a blink the man I raised stood up inside the man who had memorized talking points. Sloan, he said. Cô ấy nói gọi, nó là một cái lưới an toàn. What does she call me? Tôi hỏi, anh nhắm mắt. Khi ông mở ra, bộ phim đã mất. A liability, he whispered. The word landed on the table and did not bounce. Chúng tôi đã 43 phút và một cuộc trò chuyện được lên kế hoạch cho 10. Ngoài một cánh cửa, xe mở ra. Kit đang kéo dài chân hoặc cho tôi một đoạn nghỉ. Inside, Evan pressed his fingers to his eyelids, then let his hands fall. I thought if I cooperated, he said, she'd keep you safe. She said there were ways to make it painless. She said if I didn't help, you'd suffer. The sentences tumbled and then slowed. I told myself I was protecting you. I wasn't. I was delaying a worse sentence. I didn't move. I didn't soothe. I let him hear himself. He kept talking, and the pendant learned the weight of relief. She met me at a grief mixer, he said. Said she understood men who take care of everyone else. She said you'd be happier in a community with activities. She called Dr. Halpern modern. She scheduled the nurse without asking you because she said you'd forget and it would be easier on everyone. When I asked why the policy was so high, she said responsible families ensure the ones who anchor them. He swallowed. I knew that sentence was wrong while I was saying it to myself. Tell me one thing without her in the room, I said. What do you want to do next? Evan stared at the folder like it might start speaking. I want to stop, he said. I want to call whoever you're supposed to call when you've done something almost unforgivable and say it out loud. He looked up, and I want to make sure she can't do this to you or to anyone else again. I thought of Nora's quiet file and the names inside it that had lived to tell. I thought of Tuesday at 10, disguised as wellness, scheduled as access. I thought of dandelions in my pockets and laminated shame at a gate. I thought of the fact that love without boundaries is a hallway that never ends. There is someone to call, I said. He nodded. The tiniest surrender. Tell me the number. What happens when a son pulls his own mask off in your kitchen and asks for the number that will save you both? Do you hand him a pen or a mirror? He didn't want a lawyer's number. He wanted permission to become the man he was supposed to be. I slid the card across the table anyway. Nora James, I said. Say your name, say the truth, and don't stop. He dialed with both hands like he was steadying a life raft. When she answered, he did it, plain, complete, recorded by the small pearl at my throat and the quiet coin under his coaster. He said his full name. He said what Sloan had planned. He said what he had already done to help. He said, I want to cooperate. Nora didn't praise him. Professionals don't put sugar on a tourniquet. You'll meet with us today, she said, voice even. You'll bring the forms you were handed. We'll give you instructions, and you'll follow them without briefing your wife. He agreed. She gave him a time in a room with frosted glass. He wrote it down like a man copying his own map home. When he hung up, the kitchen held 3 versions of him at once. The boy with grass-stained knees, the man who laminated my humiliation by silence, and the son who had just set his own life on a harder track because it was the only honest one left. He put both palms on the table. Mom, he said, and the words sounded like a vow. This ends. Then say the sentence that ends it, I said. He looked me in the eyes. I choose you, Mom. The room changed temperature. Love didn't get lighter. It got specific. In that one sentence, he stopped being someone's plan and started being accountable. It didn't erase what he'd done. It altered what he would do next. We didn't hug. We planned. Arthur stepped from the hallway where he'd been waiting with discretion. Kit texted from the curb, ready. Nora called back to set the choreography with the precision of a surgeon. Evan would go to the meeting alone. Afterward, he would text Sloan to come by my house to make it right, because traps that look like apologies only spring when they smell contrition. Midway, the mini twist surfaced with the politeness of a calendar reminder. Evan admitted something he had kept hidden even from himself. There's a writer, he said, voice low. She added an accidental death benefit, double payout. He stared at the manila folder as if it could blush. And she moved the nurse's visit up. It's tonight, not Tuesday. She didn't tell you because she said you'd make it dramatic. The word dramatic landed between us, like a courtroom sigh. Arthur's jaw set. Then tonight is the window, he said. We keep you out of that house. We invite her into this one, and we let her narrate her plan to the wrong audience. Evan went to meet Nora with his folder, and the first honest fear I'd seen on his face in months. I watched him cross the threshold and felt the house draft around the missing body of my child. Kit's sedan drifted after him like shade. I brewed coffee I didn't need and let it go cold because ritual steadies hands. At 5:18, a text from Evan. Done. Coming to you. We'll invite her after. 2 minutes later, she already texted. Wants to reset at 6. He forwarded her message without commentary. We can fix this. You're confusing care with control. Let's sign what needs signing and eat something warm. It read like silk and moved like wire. We set the stage with the neatness of a woman who has cleaned other people's rooms for a living. No food, no tea. The pearl warmed against my skin. The clutch sat on the sideboard. Nora's device lived under a coaster that said home is where the coffee is. I left the cold cup beside it like a prop that knew not to speak. Kit took his seat in a car that wasn't his. Across the street where strollers pause, 2 agents I didn't know by name became joggers with admirable stamina. Arthur remained a text away, the kind of presence that keeps your spine from negotiating. At 5:50 Vey, tires whispered on asphalt. Evan arrived first, as agreed. His face looked older and younger in the same second. which is what confession does to people who mean it. He put his phone on airplane mode and set its screen down. She'll be here at 6, he said. She thinks we're signing. Let her think, I said. The bell rang on the dot. A punctuality I will always associate with people who like to manage other people's time. Sloane stood on my porch in a navy wrap dress that knew it was flattering. She held a bakery box and a smile iced to perfection. Lemon bars, she said. Your favorite. I stepped back just far enough to make entry an act, not a presumption. She brushed past the threshold with the confidence of someone who believes thresholds are suggestions. We won't need long, she said, setting the box on my counter as if she lived here. We'll do the essentials tonight. Consent's the proxy, so the nurse doesn't get delayed. And the rest can follow when emotions aren't so high. Her tone was temperature controlled. She turned to Evan. Did you bring the folder? I brought what matters, he said. She looked at the empty table and recalibrated without blinking. Lovely, she said. We can do high level tonight, then signatures tomorrow. First thing. It's better to do these things when everyone's rested. I stayed standing. We won't be doing signatures, I said. Her eyes slid to mine and softened, as if I were a small animal she could coax into a carrier. Marion, I know you're upset. Yesterday was unfortunate, but delaying care makes everything harder. She tapped the bakery box. Sugar helps. Care without consent isn't care, I said. It's control. She laughed as if I'd made a cute error on a recipe card. Words matter, she said. Let's pick kinder ones. Evan didn't sit either. He stared at his wife like a man reading instructions that finally show the picture on the box. Tell Mom why the nurse is coming tonight, he said. Voice that steady place he used to build forts in. Sloane blinked like a model asked to hold a pose. Scheduling opened up, she said. Lucky break. Tell her about the writer, he said. She tilted her head. We don't need to bore her with policy details, she said. Families insure each other. It's responsible. Tell her who the beneficiary is, he said. The air lost a degree. You, she said to him, almost tender. And me as contingent, naturally. Tell her what you told me would happen if I didn't help, he said. And the room stopped pretending to be a room. For the first time since I'd met her, the surface cracked. We're not doing this, she said softly, a warning wrapped in velvet. We are, he said. Outside, a jogger tied a shoe that didn't need tying. Somewhere, a car door sighed. Inside, the small green light at my throat blinked a heartbeat you couldn't see unless you knew where to look. Sloane nâng cao nắp ló và sắp xếp một hình vuông trên một chiếc khăn giấy như ai đó đang biểu diễn sự quan tâm trên truyền hình. Chúng tôi mệt mỏi hết cả rồi, cô ấy nói. Ăn cái gì đó và chúng ta hãy quay lại với sự tử tế. Cô ấy đẩy thanh bánh chanh 1 inch gần hơn, rồi đặt một cây bút lên trên khăn ăn. Một bức tranh tinh vật gọn gàng của lời xin lỗi và eating. Evan didn't reach for it. He kept his eyes on the woman he had promised forever to and spoke to the woman who had built his forever out of other people's endings. Tôi gọi U.S. Attorney, Annie nói. I'm cooperating. For a heartbeat, she didn't understand the sentence. Then it hit her like cold air on wet glass. She glanced at my pearls, and at the coaster, and at the bakery box, as if assessing which one held the danger. Her smile fell off her face without making a sound. What did you do? She whispered. Evan swallowed. I chose my mother. The last time I saw my son this brave, he was 6, and telling a neighbor boy to stop pulling wings off dragonflies. Today the dragonfly was me. Sloane took a step back, not large, just enough to see the doorframe and the window and the distances between. We should all take a breath, she said, voice thin now, tuned for exits. Take one here, I said. She studied Evan like a chessboard she'd miscounted. Then she set the pen down, very gently, as if sudden movements might wake the house. If you think you can prove a crime, she said, you don't understand how families work. On the porch, the wind lifted once and let go. Inside, the air balanced on the edge of another sentence. Evan opened his mouth to say it. If your child stands in your kitchen and risks his life as he knows it to tell the truth, are you ready for what that truth will cost both of you? Evan didn't lower his eyes when he said it the second time. I choose you, Mom. The sentence hung in the room like a bell that refuses to stop ringing, and Sloane looked from him to me as if sound itself had betrayed her. For an instant, she reached for the old script. Soft voice, bakery box, a pen set neatly beside lemon bars, and then the polish cracked. You think this is a crime? She said. It's family planning. I did not answer, because the answer was already recording. The door knocked twice. polite and inevitable. Evan opened it, and the joggers proved to be exactly who they were. Badges held at rib height, voices calm, words measured. Sloane tried to smile at authority, the way she smiles at waiters when the souffle falls, but the smile refused her face. Ms. Archer, the woman said, we'd like to ask you a few questions about several insurance applications and 2 medical appointments scheduled under false pretenses. The bakery box sat between us like a prop from the wrong play. Sloane lifted her chin and said nothing, which was smarter than every sentence she had planned for me. The interview happened in my sitting room, where photographs of summers and birthdays watched the present become paperwork. Evan answered questions without reaching for euphemisms. He said dates. He said names. He said how the plan worked because he had helped it work, until it didn't. Sloane waited for someone to call this a misunderstanding and found only transcripts and case numbers. When she finally spoke, she chose the word every manipulator selects when the stage lights swing around. Confused, she said, meaning me. Vulnerable, she added, meaning leverage. Nora's pen did not pause. Facts do not flinch for adjectives. They didn't cuff her in my kitchen. They scheduled and served and left with what they came for. A pattern turned into pages, and a woman who would have to speak where lies go to be cross-examined. Evan stepped onto the porch and held the rail with both hands, as if the night air were a current that could carry him off. I stood beside him and did the only thing that wouldn't weaken what he had just done. I didn't fix any of it with words. The next weeks did not move like television. There were interviews, affidavits, statements under oath, and edits to sentences that needed to say exactly what happened. Arthur managed paperwork like a conductor. Kit added quiet notes at the margins where people try to hide hands. Dr. Lang wrote the line that mattered most to me, and least to anybody whose plan required me to be foggy, oriented, capable, consenting when consenting was called for, and declining when decline was my right. The charges were not small, and they were not mine. When the hearing came, I sat in the back and learned the patience of benches. Sloane wore a navy suit that knew how to perform respectability. Her attorney called the policy a precaution, the nurse an assessment, the proxy an act of care in anticipation of future need. Words stacked neatly on top of other words, and the judge listened without encouraging any of them. Evan spoke again and did not look back once. He did not ask to be absolved. He asked to be held to the kind of account that lets a man sleep. Cooperation, the prosecutor called it. And the room made space for a person who was wrong and chose to be useful rather than loyal to wrongness. The outcomes were not dramatic in the way the worst parts of my mind had rehearsed at 3 a.m. They were exact. Sloane faced charges that fit their names: fraud, attempted exploitation, interference with medical decision-making, conspiracy around an insurance application that should never have had my name near it. She did not cry. She did not apologize. She watched the floor because the floor does not look back. Evan accepted a plea that sounded like consequence and sounded like beginning at the same time. Probation with conditions, compulsory counseling, restitution where money had been moved without consent, and a commitment to testify wherever his voice could keep someone else's mother from being narrated out of her life. After, the town did what towns do. Some people whispered and were wrong in precise ways. Some knocked on my door with casseroles and looked like women who would fight a bear for their children. I went to the carrier store and learned the language of my own phone plan. I made a file for every document and a habit of making copies when anyone asked for anything with my name on it. I wrote a letter to the grief center and watched them change their intake procedures from nice to safe. Arthur and I met at my table once a week until we didn't need to anymore. And then he still came by sometimes because friendship is what happens when the crisis stops and the person remains. Kit sent a short text the day the case moved from open to pending trial. 4 words that felt like a door, finally locking on the correct side. Nora called when she didn't have to call and said, "Thank you for choosing to remember in real time," which is the kindest praise anyone has ever given me. Evan asked to sit on my porch, not because he needed to be forgiven, but because he needed to be seen doing the work that makes forgiveness a possibility someday. We watched a neighbor kid ride a bicycle with training wheels that squeaked like optimism. He told me when he was scared, and he told me when he wasn't, and he told me when the urge to make everything easy tried to sneak back into his bones. He started paying attention to verbs too, because verbs reveal allegiance long before nouns do. He said repair, not reset. He said boundaries, Tava, not rules. He said I love you, and left space. After it, where control used to live, I did not become someone different. Tôi trở thành một ai đó đã luyện tập hơn ở việc là ai tôi đã từng là. Tôi đã học cách phân biệt được sự giúp đỡ và sự xử lý. Tôi đã học rằng tình yêu không có giới hạn, là một hành lang không bao giờ kết thúc, và rằng sự quan tâm là một từ đẹp cho đến khi nó được dùng để lấy tên của bạn. I learned that proof is a form of tenderness, when tenderness has to keep people honest. And I learned that the sentence your child chooses in your kitchen can unclench a future, even if it cannot unwrite the past. There is a moment they do not put in news stories. The quiet afternoon months later, when you realize no one has sent you a form in weeks. No one has asked for a signature just in case. And your mail is again postcards and electric bills, instead of glossy pamphlets about places where you are meant to be safe by being supervised. I made tomato soup and grilled cheese, and ate both at my table with the window open, because simple food is sometimes the loudest declaration that you're home. Before you ask, yes, I still wear the pearls. Not because I need the device anymore, but because I like the weight, and because I remember what it means to be recorded when the world would rather make you a rumor. If I have one open question that does not resolve, it is this. How many mothers learn to mistrust their own good sense because someone said you're confused with a kind voice and a plan? And what will it take for us to teach our daughters and sons to hear that sentence for what it is the first time? I have decided that in this house, love will be a verb that never requires another signature to be real. I have decided that being difficult is what somebody calls you when you decline a leash. And I have decided that the most important thing I will hand to anyone who sits at my table is not food or advice, but the sentence I finally earned the right to say to myself, I am not imagining this. I am preparing for it. Through shock, conflict, the highest pitch of fear, and the slow pivot to truth, one rule carried me from lamination at a gate to laughter at my own stove. Family is worth fighting for, but it is not above the law of dignity, and dignity keeps its receipts. If you have ever stood at a door with your name spelled wrong on purpose, you are not alone. Through this story, what is stirring in you right now? I'm listening for the moments when care turned to control, or when forgiveness had to travel with boundaries so love could survive. If a part of this journey brushed against your own betrayal, accountability, a signature you refused, tell me about it below so the room we build here can steady someone else's hands. Leave a comment, tap subscribe, and if this spoke to you, press the heart and share it forward so the next person hears it when they need it. I'll meet you in the next story, where we keep returning to the root, family, messy as it can be, because that's where the hardest lessons and the best work begin.